reality of the matter is there's no market for last year's model. It's definitely true that if you throw more compute at the model, if you make the model bigger, it'll get better. For folks who have a lot of money, that's a really compelling strategy. I think we'll continuously exist in a world of multiple models, some focused and verticalized, others completely horizontal. There's going to be a consolidation in the space for sure. It's really dangerous when you make yourself a subsidiary of your cloud provider.
Ready to go? Aidan, I am so excited for this. So I was going through the prep first before I was writing the schedule, and I was thinking, well, where do we start? And then I saw one of the notes, and Aidan, it says that you grew up or were brought up in rural Ontario in a house your grandfather or father built by hand. What was that like as a starting point? And can you take me there?
Yeah, I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Ontario. It was a big 100-acre lot, which had it's all forested, and it's a maple forest. And so it was super cool to grow up in like the most Canadian environment ever. But it was very distant from technology, for sure.
But you loved gaming, didn't you?
I did love gaming. So I love technology from scratch. It's just, it was really hard to access it. Like we couldn't get internet. We could do dial-up, but I had dial-up for years after people had gotten high-speed internet. And so all my friends, they were online gaming, doing all this sort of stuff. And I was just so jealous, or not jealous, but just like missing out on this wave of technology, the internet that was coming about and becoming popular. So it made me obsessed with tech. I would like sit at home with our computer with shitty dial-up internet, and I would just try to make it faster. I would try to make the most out of what I did have. And eventually that led to wanting to learn how to code and understand how the web works. And, can I make this stuff faster? Can I load the internet faster? Because I was watching pixels go line by line. And that's really what pushed me into CS. Just sort of like forced to learn how this tech works so that I could get more out of it.
There's this weird understanding that I have now from meeting so many incredible founders, and it's this incredibly high correlation between those that gamed in their early years and those that achieved success. Why do you think gaming is such a contributor to successful founders?
Video games teach something to you. You're much more willing to grind, right? To just do repetitive, difficult, painful things towards some broader goal. So that sort of resilience, I think, is important. And then also the fact that you can respawn, like you get to try again, you get a second attempt. That optimism or that framing is really important. I think in a lot of cultures, you get one shot. You have a reputation, and if you fuck it, it's done. It's over for you. But maybe what gaming can give people is a sense of you can fuck up and you can try again and you can get better. And the second time you fuck up less than the first time, and the third time you fuck up less than the second time. And so that notion of progress through failure, I think, is probably something very significant for founders.
I also always believe in the power of like game design and like progressive overload, the way that games are designed to be easier at first. You feel great, you pick up confidence. You would never start a game with a really hard first level where people fail and it's like, this is impossible, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, there's analogies. So in machine learning, that's called curriculum learning. Like that you want to start, okay, let's first teach the model to do something very simple. Let's make it a little bit more complex and build on that knowledge. What's funny is that curriculum learning has actually failed in machine learning. We don't really do curriculum learning. It's just throw the hardest material and the easiest material all at the same time and let the model figure it out. But yeah, for humans, it's so effective. It's such an important piece of how we learn. It's interesting to see that it hasn't taken off.
You said about kind of just throwing it at the model. I just wanted to dive in at the deep end bluntly, because I think it's a question that everyone's asking, which is like, everyone just says, just throw more compute, and that is the single biggest rate limiter that we have today. We just need more compute and performance will increase. Do you think that is true? There is a lot more room to run there, or it is other elements that are now holding back performance?
I mean, it's definitely true that if you throw more compute at the model, if you make the model bigger, it'll get better. It's kind of like, it's the most trustworthy way to improve models. It's also the dumbest, right? Like if all else fails, just make it bigger. And so for folks who have a lot of money, that's a really compelling strategy. It's super low risk. You know it's going to get better. Just scale the model up, pay more money, pay for more compute, and go. But yeah, I mean, I believe in it. I just think it's extremely inefficient. There are much better ways. If you look at the past, let's say like year and a half. So between, I guess by now it would be like between ChatGPT coming out or GPT-4 coming out and now, GPT-4, if it's true what they say, and it's 1.7 trillion parameters, this big MOE, we have models that are better than that model that are like 13 billion parameters, right? And so the scale of change, like how quickly that became cheaper is absurd. Like it's a kind of surreal. And so yes, you can achieve that quality of model just by scaling, but you probably shouldn't.
Does that continue in that same progressive advancement? And what I mean by that is, do we continue to see that same scaling advantages, or does it actually plateau at some point? As you said there, we always hear about Moore's law. At some point, it just becomes a better calculator for the iPhone.
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly requires exponential input. You need to continuously be doubling your compute in order to sustain linear gains in intelligence. But I think that probably goes on for a very, very, very long time. It'll just keep getting smarter. But you run into like economic constraints, right? Not a lot of people bought the original GPT-4, certainly not a lot of enterprises, because it was huge. It was massive, super inefficient to serve, so costly, not smart enough to justify that cost. And so I think there's a lot of pressure on making smaller, more efficient models smarter via data and algorithms, methods, rather than just scaling up due to market forces, just pressure on price.
Will we live in this world of unbundled, verticalized models, which are much more efficient and smaller, designed for specific use cases? Or will there be much larger 3 to 5 models, which kind of rule it all?
There will be both. There'll be both. Like the one pattern I think we've seen emerge over the past couple years is that people love prototyping with a generally smart model. They don't want to prototype with a specific model. They don't want to spend the time fine-tuning a model to make it specifically good at the thing that they care about. What they want to do is just grab, an expensive big model, prototype with that, prove that it can be done, and then distill that into an efficient focus model at the specific thing they care about. So that pattern has really emerged. So I think we'll continuously exist in a world of multiple models, some focused and verticalized, others completely horizontal.
You spoke about kind of the cost and needing to double compute to keep that same kind of linear level of intelligence. The cost is exorbitant. And unlike, maybe I'm wrong here and I'm too young to remember past technology cycles, but almost unlike anything we've seen before in technology. I think it's $3 billion a year that OpenAI is spending. How can you afford to maintain your position in this race unless you are Microsoft, Amazon, Google, or Facebook?
I think if you're just doing the scaling project, you have to be one of those, or you have to be an effective subsidiary of one of those companies. But there's a lot more to be done. Like if you're not completely adherent to scale as the only path forward, if you believe that there are data innovations, there are model and method innovations.
Can we what are data innovations and what are model and method innovations?
Yeah, so pretty much all of the major gains that we've seen in the open source space have come from data improvements. So models getting much better by taking higher quality data from the internet, better scraping algorithms, parsing those web pages, pulling out the right parts, upweighting specific parts of the internet, because there's lots of repetition and junk, right? And so pulling out the most valuable, knowledge-rich parts of the internet and emphasizing them to the model. Synthetic data and the ability to create new data that is super scalable. So you can get many, many billions of words or, hundreds of millions of pages of this stuff, but it's no humans involved, just written by models. Those innovations, the ability to increase the quality of data, have led to, I think, most of the gains that we're seeing right now.
Okay, so that's data innovation, method and model innovation.
Yeah, so this is stuff like new RL algorithms. There's lots of rumors about Q-star and what that might be. Ideas around searching for the solution. So the status quo with models is I ask you a question and you're a model. I ask you a question and the model is expected to respond immediately with the right answer. That's an incredibly high burden to place on the model, right? Like you couldn't do that to a human. You couldn't ask a human a hard question and expect them to just regurgitate the answer immediately. They need to work through it.
Have you ever been in a board meeting?
Yeah, right. Yeah, no. Sometimes we do. No, but I think, yeah, there's like this very obvious next step for models, which is you need to let them think and work through problems. You need to let them fail. They need to try something, fail, understood why they failed, roll that back, and make another attempt. And so at present, there's no notion of problem solving in models.
And when we say problem solving, that is the same as reasoning, correct?
Yeah.
Why is that so hard? And why do we not have any notion of that today?
I think it's not that reasoning is hard. I think it's that there's not a lot of training data that demonstrates reasoning out on the internet. The internet is a lot of the output of a reasoning process. Like you don't show your work when you're writing something on the web. You sort of present your conclusion or present your idea, which is the output of loads of thinking and experience and discussion. So we just lack the training data. It's just not freely available. You have to build it yourself. And so that's what companies like Cohere and OpenAI and Anthropic, et cetera, that's what we're doing now is collecting data that demonstrates human reasoning.
How do you think about competing against like OpenAI's incredible UGC play?
Yeah, no, that's super difficult. And especially with enterprises, they never let you train on their data. And so we can't train on any of our customers' data, super private. Their perspective is their data is their IP. There's too many secrets in their IP. And so they're just not willing to do it. And I'm super empathetic to that position. And so for us, our focus is synthetic data. We push a lot on that, as well as having like a human annotation force and Scale as a partner for that. We have our own folks in-house, but that's the burden that's placed on us because we're not a consumer company. We have to generate this data ourselves. The benefit is we're more focused, so we have less surface area to cover. So it's not the entire world showing up and asking us to do potentially anything. It's like enterprises with very clear patterns for the type of stuff they want to do. It's like they want to automate certain finance functions or they want to automate certain, HR functions. And so the scope is reduced dramatically, which lets us really focus in on those pieces.
What will the synthetic data market look like in 10 years? And will it be won by 2 to 3 providers?
I mean, I've heard that the current LLM API market is dominated by synthetic data. That's mostly what people are doing. They're creating data from these big, expensive models to fine-tune smaller models that are more efficient. So they're ostensibly like distilling the bigger models. I don't know how sustainable that is as a market, but I definitely think there's always going to be a new task or new problem or new demand for data. And whether that comes from models or whether it comes from humans, we're going to have to meet the demand.
One thing I'm kind of concerned about, Bunty, or I look at with hesitation, is you see OpenAI price dumping. You see, Meta releasing for free, and Mark, dispelling or pronouncing the value of open source and an open ecosystem. Are we seeing this real diminishing value of these models, and is it a race to the bottom and a race to zero?
I think if you're only selling models for the next little while, it's going to be a really tricky game. It's going to be really tough. It won't be a small market. There will be a lot of
stupid. Who's only selling models and who's selling models and something else?
I don't want to name names, but let's say Cohere right now only sells models. We have an API and you can access our models through that API. I think that will change soon. There are going to be changes in the product landscape and what we offer to sort of push, not away from that, but to add on to that picture and that product suite. But if you're only selling models, it's going to be difficult because it's going to be like a zero margin business because there's so much price dumping. People are giving away the model for free. It'll still be a big business It'll still be a pretty high number because people need this tech. It's growing very, very quickly. But the margins, at least now, are going to be very, very tight. And so that's why there is a lot of excitement at the application layer. And I think that discourse in the market is probably right to point out that value is accruing beneath, like at the chip layer, because everyone is spending insane amounts of money on chips to build these models in the first place. And then above, at the application layer, where you see stuff like, let's say ChatGPT, which is charged on a like per user basis, $20 a month type thing. That seems to be where, at this phase, value is accruing. I think that the model layer is an attractive business in the long term, but in the short term, with the status quo, it is a very low margin, sort of commoditized business.
If we just kind of break it down, you mentioned kind of the chip layer there. How do you think about your spend today on chips and how that has changed over time as a percent of spend?
Yeah, it's gotten way, way more. So it's a huge chunk of our spend now, way too much.
And you have a direct relationship with NVIDIA?
Yeah, and loads of chip players. Like we're close with NVIDIA, AMD, in conversations with lots of startups that are building new chips. We also run on TPUs from Google.
And that's because you don't want to have a single point of failure?
Yeah, well, it's mostly because market demands it. Like our customers want to be able to run on tons of different platforms. They want optionality. They don't want to get locked into one. And so we need to provide a really diverse base of platforms to run on. Similarly to how we've been very avoidant to get locked into one cloud, and we want to be available on every cloud. It's because market demands it. Like customers want choice. They don't want to get verticalized lock-in to one provider.
Totally get you. Do you think everyone will be kind of verticalizing their own stack in terms of building out their own chip capabilities? We've seen Apple recently talk a lot about kind of their own verticalization and owning the chip layer too. Do you think that'll be a continuing trend or not?
I think it will be. Right now, chips are just exceptionally high margin, and there's very, very little choice in the market. That's changing. I think it's going to change faster than other people think. But yeah, I'm very confident.
I think you're also seeing the stockpiling of GPUs change a lot. Before there was this kind of real supply chain shortage.
Yes. Yeah,
and now it's not so much.
No, yeah, the shortage is going down. I think it's becoming clear there are going to be more options available, and not just on the inference side. Like inference is already quite heterogeneous. You actually already have loads of options on the inference side, which is like not the training of the models, but the serving. On the training side, the picture has been, it's essentially one company that creates the chips that you can use to train big models. That's still true today. But actually it's not true today. There's two companies. You can definitely train big models on TPUs. Those are actually now a usable platform for super large scale model training. And I think Google has proven that quite convincingly. And then there's NVIDIA. But I think soon AMD, Trainium, these platforms are going to really be ready for prime time.
The question that I have is when you look at the spend on the models and actually compute, and you see, what worries me is actually model progression is moving so much faster than data center build out and kind of compute progression. And so it's like when you look at a year's time, are we going to be running the newest, latest models on H100s or whatever the 18-month-old compute is? And is there a misalignment between model advancement and compute advancement?
I mean, the supply chain thing is like really, really interesting. I think...
Do you need to build out your own data centers?
No, we partner with folks.
Is there ever a time when that changes?
You know what? We're an economically rational actor. And so if it's cheaper for us to build out our own data centers, we'll go do that. We've run the numbers and we feel confident that the price we're getting from our providers makes that not a really attractive path. But yeah, I mean, the other reason we do it is if there were a chip to come out that was really attractive in its cost profile, but no provider would procure it for us.
Did you have any challenges in access to significant amounts of compute chips in the early days? Today, has that changed?
We've been around for like 5 years now. And so it was like well before the whole thing started popping off. So we were lucky.
Did you expect it to pop off?
I mean, I wouldn't have started the company if I didn't expect it.
Over
Not in the way that it
because it
happened.
was a
Totally. It happened later and much more suddenly than I expected.
Because you co-authored the piece in 2017 around Transformers.
Yeah.
And so you were expecting it to pop off relatively quickly, I take it.
No, not at that moment. In 2017, I was the intern on this Transformer paper, and I thought, no, this is just research. We just create new architectures, improve translation scores by 3%, and that's what it is. I didn't expect all that came of that architecture, the Transformer, and the community's love for it, and real consolidation onto the Transformer as a platform for building AI. That I didn't expect. With language modeling and the whole scaling project, I thought the world would catch on way faster to that piece. It started to become really obvious, but then it was 2-3 years before everyone woke up and it sort of hit the world.
What was that turning point? Was it ChatGPT?
It totally was, yeah. It was ChatGPT. It was putting the technology directly in front of the user. So you don't have to explain it to your mom or dad or whatever. You can sit down, talk to this thing, experience what it's like to talk to these models.
Do you think chat is the best interface for consumers?
For some stuff, I think for other stuff, GUI, like a user interface, a traditional visual one is quite good. I think it really depends. Chat as an interface onto everything, I don't think makes sense. I don't want to have to type out explicitly my instructions to get stuff done. Sometimes I just want to click some buttons and go through a GUI and get the job done. So yeah, I don't think GUIs are dead and that we should replace everything with a text box. But I do think it provides this really compelling interface. Certainly voice does. Voice is magical. Certainly it was magical the first time I saw a model write text back to me as compellingly as a human. That happened in 2017, shortly after we submitted the paper. We started training language models on Wikipedia, and we sampled from those models, and it could write Wikipedia pages as convincing as a human page. And so that was a very magical moment that computers kind of woke up and started speaking back to us. And then the next time was dialogue as an interface. So not just I submit an instruction, the model returns a response, but having a conversation over chat with the model.
OpenAI are investing a lot in voice. Mm-hmm. Do you think their confidence in voice as the next kind of interface with consumers is right and justified?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anyone who has tried having a voice-based conversation with one of these models, it's a stunning experience. You're kind of left in shock when you hear the model exhibiting emotion and inflection, and you hear it breathe to inhale before it speaks. You hear its lip smacking. There's something so incredibly compelling about that experience. It's hard to describe until you try it for the first time. It's such a compelling interface. It's so compelling.
I've always was brought up on the idea that actually we always overestimate things in the short term and underestimate them in the long term. To what extent do you think that's the case here? Or actually, voice is coming and coming pretty quickly. GPT-5 is coming and coming, whether that's in 3 to 6 months, still coming pretty quickly. To what extent are we actually underestimating the short term?
I think it's okay. There's two things happening. One, it's getting harder. It's getting harder to deliver gains in the models. It is getting more difficult, more arduous, more costly, because there was a time where the models were dumb enough that I could pull. I say dumb enough, but the models were
not sophisticated enough.
Yeah, sufficiently unintelligent that I could pull anyone off the street. Any human was more intelligent than the model and had something to teach it, right? I could just grab someone, say, talk to this model, find errors, and they will, and improve it. Eventually, the models, it was just kind of hard to get people to the average person to find knowledge gaps or that type of thing. And so you had to start going to domain experts. And initially, like cheap kind of junior ones, like students of computer science could teach the model something. Students of biology could teach the model something. And then the model started getting really good and kind of matching that level of knowledge. And you're just going into more specific and more scarce pools of talent to get them to teach the model their knowledge. And so it gets more high friction, more expensive to teach the model the incremental new knowledge.
When does it not become worth it, if you know what I mean? If you think about, like, I always think about language learning, which is like you can learn something like 95% of a language in 6 months, but to get to 98% proficiency, it takes 5 years. I kind of bastardized that stat, but it's about that. To what extent does one go, actually, for that extra incremental 0.5% increase, it's another $1 billion? That no longer is efficient.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, costs are falling super fast on everything, like the compute costs, dollars per flop, just the scale of model.
Dollars per flop?
Yeah, like how much a flop costs.
Oh, right.
Or flops per dollar. So a flop is a unit of compute, and a model.
Sorry, dude, that's hilarious. A flop, like for me in the UK, is like a
flop.
Yeah, like a flop, like a mistake. Like, I completely flopped that one. I was like, dollars per flop. Is this like a new thing?
No. It's a super old thing. It's floating point operations. So it's literally like one clock cycle of a.
That's amazing. I'm glad I clarified.
Chip. Yeah. No. And so if you have like 10 billion parameters, that basically equates to some number of flops. And if you 10x that, if you have 100 billion parameters, that equates to 10x that number of flops approximately. The price for a flop goes down super, super quickly over time. And so that's what's unlocked much larger models today compared to 2017 and even 2 years ago.
Given that, do you not think that actually it is not too late for a new startup to enter the model space? Because everyone's like, oh, it's far too late for a startup to enter the model space. But actually, given the decreasing cost barrier, does that not mean it's actually more accessible than ever for startups to do?
Yeah, so it becomes cheaper to build last year's model by like a factor of 10 or 100 each year. We just get better data, cheaper compute. Yeah. So yeah, it definitely lowers the barrier to the previous generation of models. The reality of the matter is nobody cares about the previous generation. Nobody wants them. There's no market for last year's model. It's like useless in comparison to this year's model. Any sort of like technological development really makes the last generation obsolete super quickly.
I think the difference is like, it costs you $10 million to build V1, so I'm just saying as a software product, and then to make V2 that update a little bit better, it's like another $1 or $2 million. But here it's like $3 billion to build one, and then $5 billion to build two. The increment is not increment; it is order of magnitude.
I don't know if it's always the pattern that it's cheaper to build the next generation. I think with like chips, for example, and other very complicated pieces of technology, it does get more expensive to generate each new generation. And we still do it because it's worth it.
Okay, so going back to your statement though, sorry, because I went off on a tangent there. So like, no one gives a shit about last year's model.
Mm-hmm. Well, you were asking, do the improvements sustain? And I was saying it's getting harder to improve these models. It's getting higher friction. The second weird effect is that because these models are getting smarter, humanity's ability to distinguish between them, or not humanity, but each individual's ability to distinguish between them becomes way harder. You can't tell the difference between generations because you're not enough of an expert in medicine, mathematics, physics to actually feel the change. Like the model is already kind of as good as it can get with all the basic level knowledge, which is what you and I have. And so when we interact with it, we get the same experience between generations. But in reality, those generations are changing dramatically in much more specific capabilities or raw intelligence. And yeah, you were asking, is it worth it? Is it worth it to keep spending so much money to push forward? And I think absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. It's worth it to someone.
Why?
Even if for you and I, like as consumers, when we're using this stuff, like we don't care if it knows C-star algebras and like quantum physics. It doesn't matter to us. It has no impact on our experience with this technology. But that's really helpful for a researcher in quantum physics. And so we'll make more progress there by providing tools. It's the same question around just technology in general. Like we have abundant food, we have, super cheap cars now, and we have phones in all of our pockets. We're kind of good. Like we've got it. Should we really invest in the next generation of technology that focuses on, creating a new material for a spaceship so that it can get up into orbit more efficiently? Yeah, we should. We should. And it might not matter to you. Like you don't give a shit if the spaceship gets up into orbit cheaper, but it matters to someone a lot and they're willing to pay and there's a market for it. And that's how progress sustains itself.
That continuing progress, going back to it, obviously costs and will continue to cost a lot of money. You said before a really interesting two words, which was effective subsidiaries. And we've seen a lot of companies be kind of bought, acqui-hired, whatever that is, subsumed in. I think everyone realizes now that cloud is the cash cow that keeps on giving. When you look at kind of the continuing growth rates and profitability of Azure and Google Cloud and everything in between, and actually you'll just see the majority of those smaller model providing companies bought up by these large cloud providers. Do you agree with that as a probable likelihood for the next 3 to 5 years?
3 years, yeah. Yeah. I think there will be a culling of the space. I think it's already happening. I think a lot of the model builders that weren't...
Adapt's gone to Amazon. We had David on the show. He was fantastic. Loved David.
He's great.
Really, really good. Inflection, obviously gone to Microsoft.
And I think there's more coming. There's going to be a consolidation in the space for sure. And it's really dangerous when you make yourself a subsidiary of your cloud provider.
Why?
Well, it's just not good business, right? So to raise money as a company, just generally, you need to go and convince some investors who they only care about ROI on that capital, and they give you the money and you go create some value using it. But when you're doing this raising from cloud providers thing, the math is super different.
Do you think venture investors will make money from the model investments we've seen over the last few years?
Cohere's investors will. They'll make a lot of money.
That was normal back then. And feel great for making these people who believed in you a load of money, or you're like, fuck, that was cheap and I shouldn't have given away that much?
No, I mean, I think that everyone who was there at that point is still here. They're still fighting. So our first investor was Radical Ventures, Jordan Jacobs there. And he's still on our board. He's still, I call him like the fourth co-founder of Cohere. Like he's built the company alongside us and is still, very active and present in building the company. So I don't regret it.
What was the latest price?
The media reports that it was a little over 5.5.
Does that cause you stress? And what I mean by that is just like, when you look at revenues to valuation, I know we're not in that game, but at some point everyone is in that game.
Of course.
Does that make you go, fucking hell, we got a long way to go? When I look at Men's Health, I'm like, fucking hell, I got a long way to go.
I think it's definitely pressure. It's good pressure. Like we have to, like you say, everyone gets into the revenue multiples game at some point. At some point, it converges to public market multiples. I think we are actually in a dramatically better position than a lot of our comparables.
Why?
Because our valuation is not at the crazy state that a lot of others are. That's my belief. We still have to grow into it, but I'm very confident that the market is strong. A lot of people need these models. On the margin side, it's under pressure right now because of price dumping and because of free models being given out. But that will change over time. And then Cohere, our product stack, will also evolve.
Which one do you most respect?
I would say OpenAI.
Why?
They pave the way. Just sort of like a irrational conviction to this vision of scaling. And I think that was driven by, I remember talking to Ilya about this stuff way before GPT-1, in the Transformer times, around that time, because he was big in the Toronto scene. He studied under Jeff, came from Toronto, his family's in Toronto. And this idea of scaling was in his head. It was in his head back then, years before he actually started pursuing it properly. And that conviction led to the world that we live in today. Like this objectively magical technology that's emerged and is now sitting available to everyone. I really admire Ilya.
Yeah, Ethan Mollick from Wharton said on the show yesterday that OpenAI really only cares about AGI and the pursuit of AGI. And so they abandon products like Code Interpreter and a lot of other really useful products because they're focused on AGI. So it's not a criticism, but just like that's their focus. Do you agree with that, or do you think they are actually kind of dual-minded in terms of both going for the long-term AGI and also being much more cognizant of creating short-term valuable products for enterprise and for consumers more broadly?
At least like lately, or in the new OpenAI, they're like a product company. They're like hardcore building a consumer product. That is their objective, and it's working. People love that product. It's, you know, a household name at this point. So I think in the consumer space, they're going to be a product company. And I think that they have to become one in order to foot the bill to build what they want to build. But if you look at some of the departures, I would say it seems like the AGI effort is starting to take a backseat to product and to the consumer offering.
Something that I worry about is, and I use Canva as an example of this, which is like, are we going to see companies be able to make more revenue per user from adding AI to their products? You know, every company is an AI company now, whether it's Zendesk with customer support, Notion with note-taking, Canva with design. It's all AI. And, you know, Canva bluntly said on the show recently that they are having margin compression because they don't charge more per seat, but they have AI infused in all of their product. And so you can create, you know, anything with AI in their products. And obviously each query costs money. And so it's costing them more money and they're making the same revenue. Will we actually be able to make more revenue per user, or will it just create a better customer experience?
There's two different camps right now. Some people are pricing the exact same with AI features and using it to drive expansion in their business. And then the other folks like Microsoft, like Salesforce, like Notion as well, they're charging for the AI features and getting a bigger business as a product. Both of those strategies are fine and super reasonable. For folks like Canva who are keeping the same price, I mean, I think it's a good bet. They want to grow their user base. They want to expand their user set, just give them the most useful product possible. At the moment, don't worry about margins because the cost of AI is falling super, super quickly. I think that's reasonable.
Okay, fantastic. Can I ask, on enterprises, yeah, Canva is obviously making a hard push for enterprise. You sell into amazing enterprises. What's the number one blocker today for why enterprises don't adopt?
It's mostly trust in the technology, so security. Everyone is very sketched out by the current state of things. Who's
So
training on my
sketched
data?
out means concerned?
Yeah.
Right. Not like a flop.
Yeah. Well, they're hoping that they don't have a flop. So they're really scared that someone's going to take their data, train on it, and put them in some sort of like security vulnerability, or that they'll lose IP. I think that's a very valid concern because people have been training on user data.
Is there anything you can do to reassure them other than, hey, we'll just not use it and use synthetic data?
Yeah. So our deployment model is set up to do that. We focus on private deployments, like inside their VPC, on-prem. So what that means is just like it's on their hardware completely privately. We're not asking them to send data over to us. We'll process it and give you back the response from the model. We're saying we'll bring our models to where your data is, and we can't see any of it.
Will we see the movement back to on-prem in this new world?
When I speak to folks, it's super conflicted. In financial services, yeah, people are pulling away from cloud. They're pulling away from cloud. They're building out their own data center capacity. Everywhere else still seems to be, we need to migrate to cloud. It doesn't make sense for us to have these data centers. I don't know. I think that it probably depends on the vertical that you're looking at.
What do they just get totally wrong about AI? I think the enterprise education curve is still very early. What do they just not understand about it?
There's a lot of fear around AI being wrong. There's like hallucination in these models, and everyone views that as some sort of like, the technology is doomed. Sometimes it hallucinates. It doesn't reflect reality. The models definitely do hallucinate. The hallucination rates have been dropping dramatically, but they'll always have some chance of making stuff up or getting something wrong. But we exist in a world with humans, and humans hallucinate constantly. We get stuff wrong. We, misremember things. And so we exist in a world that's robust to error. And so I think there's too much emphasis on that.
Benchmarks, though, do we?
We do, yeah.
We do?
Yeah. Like Vectara has one, and there are other hallucination benchmarks.
Okay, and we're seeing them decrease at the same level as model progression?
Same level I don't know about, but definitely it's been decreasing super fast.
Okay.
And with RAG, it's like a step change drop.
And so if anyone doesn't know, RAG is?
A retrieval augmented generation. So it's the idea that you have a model.
Oh, thank you for that description.
Yeah. It's the idea that you have a model which can query out to a knowledge base. And that knowledge base might be your internal documents or a search engine. It might write a query to a search engine, pull back the results, and then use that as part of its answer and cite its sources. So it's saying, I'm making this claim because I read it over here. So now you can audit whether it's correct. And it also, as a byproduct of this setup, really stops lying as much. It doesn't have to make up as much because it has reference material it can draw from.
I get you. Okay, that makes total sense. And that's a game changer.
For hallucination, definitely. And also just for like customizing the models, because they've seen the public web. So they know a lot about public information. But for private stuff, I want my model to be able to answer questions about my email inbox, which is something only I have access to. And so the ability for the model to query my email inbox, pull back that information, it just makes it more knowledgeable about the stuff that I care about.
Are we still in experimental budgets for enterprise? Everyone's like, no, we're just playing with budgets now. Yeah. Is that fair, or are we actually moving into mainstream?
It's really started to shift. So last year, 100%. It was like the year of the proof of concept. Everyone was sort of testing it out, playing around with it. But recently, there's been a big shift to urgency to get this tech into production. I think a lot of enterprises are scared of being caught flat-footed. They've spent a year running POCs and testing stuff out, and now they're sprinting towards, I want to put this into production, transform my product, augment my workforce.
What's the number one use case for them in terms of what they need or want?
The number one use case?
Because it feels like every board is saying, hey, what's your AI strategy? Mm-hmm. And it's like, what does that actually mean? Like, is it Klarna, who's very much, we want to optimize our customer service and we're going to do that? Is that like the number one, customer service? Is it employee augmentation and productivity? Is it whatever that is?
I think it's employee augmentation. It's these models becoming like a partner or a colleague to your entire workforce. That's the most popular use case.
I think Copilot's the right way to do that.
I think Copilot is great, and it's like the right idea of augmenting a workforce with an assistant. But it's siloed again within an ecosystem. So it plugs into Office and the Microsoft suite of products. But enterprises don't just use Microsoft, right? They use Microsoft for their email and docs and spreadsheets, and then they use Salesforce for their CRM. They have SAP for their ERP. They have some HRM. They have internal software that they built for themselves. And if you really want to augment the workforce, you need to have a platform for developing these assistants, these agents, that's agnostic to a particular tool set, and that prioritizes the tool sets rationally across what people actually use, what the market actually uses. So I don't think that's going to be done by Copilot.
You mentioned the word agent there. Agents is one of the kind of hottest topics in venture land. Do you think it's justified, the hype around agents, agentic behavior, what it does to workflows?
I mean, the hype is justified 100%. Like that's the promise of AI. The promise of these models is that they would be able to carry out work by themselves. That just dramatically transforms productivity. Once you have a model that can go off and do things independently over a very long time horizon. So no longer like, I'm going to do this one thing for you immediately in return and I'm done. But like over the next 6 months, I'm going to be, pumping deals into your top of funnel or something like that, right? Like pulling, doing outbound for you. It just completely transforms what an organization can do. So the hype is justified. I think my critique would be, is that work going to be most effectively done outside the model builders or within? Who's going to be best positioned to actually build that product?
Why would it be best done within the models first?
Completely depends on the quality of the model. It entirely depends on the model. Like the model is the reasoner behind the agent. And so you have to be able to intervene at that level. If you're not able to actually transform the model to be better at the thing that you care about, if you're not the one building the model, if you're just a consumer of the model, you're structurally disadvantaged to build that product.
Who do you think is disadvantaged today? Everyone talks and is quite cynical about Salesforce. I'm like, I don't know. I wouldn't bet against Benioff.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. He's amazing. And I think he's very cognizant of the threat against them. And I don't think he'll let it happen. So I don't see it going anywhere. The other thing is that you forget how sticky enterprise software is. There's not a lot of like mass displacement of enterprise software. Yeah. It kind of just stays for decades. It's really hard to displace an enterprise software company. I think there's an opportunity for really transformative new consumer experiences, and consumers are far less loyal to one provider. They're going to go where their friends go. They're going to go where they get the best service, best product. And so if someone can come along and provide something that is considerably better than what exists today using AI, consumers will move.
Who do you think has the best researchers?
Cohere. But other than Cohere, I think it's quite distributed at this stage. It used to be very concentrated. It used to be like Google Brain.
Really?
Yeah, Google Brain, DeepMind.
Why were they so behind then?
Well, they weren't, in the sense that like 2 weeks after we released the Transformer paper, we started training language models. So we, like, technologically and research-wise, Google Brain was certainly not behind. I don't want to comment on Google, but I can say that what's really important is product vision and the ability to imagine what could be with the technology. It's not just the technological development itself, it's the vision of what you can do with it. And even if you have people inside your organization who see that vision, are you equipped to enable them to execute on it? Or do they have to go somewhere else to execute on it? I think those are the questions that you have to ask. And then lastly, the scaling hypothesis, this idea that models will just continue to get better the more we pump into them, and that we should be spending not just 10 times as much on building models, but 100 times, 1,000 times as much to build models. That's like a super risky, uncertain, kind of crazy bet to make. I definitely don't knock Google for the decisions it made. I think OpenAI made good bets.
What do you think OpenAI's best bet was?
The scale hypothesis, for sure. Like, just that scaling is going to sustain and that we should continue to 10x, 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 10x. Yeah, so many people didn't believe in that. There was so much pushback on it. It was just like such a stupid, superfluous effort to go pursue. They had the conviction to push through.
What do you think is the biggest thing that people are not seeing about the community right now in AI, and how we're looking at the next 12 to 24 months?
I think there's sort of like a meme that's going around of people saying, we've plateaued, nothing's coming, it's slowing down. I actually really think that's wrong. And not just from like we need to 10x compute and that type of thing perspective, and trust me, it'll get better. But from a methods perspective. So when I was talking about like reasoners and planners and models that can try things, fail, and recover from that failure, and carry out tasks that take a long time to accomplish, these are like, for the technologists, obvious things that just don't exist in the technology today. Like, we just haven't had time to turn our focus there and add that capability into the model. For the past year plus, folks have been focusing on that, and it will be ready for production. And so we'll see that come out, and I think that will be a big change. in terms of capability.
So for me as an investor, Aidan, help me. You're now an investor with 20 VC. Where's the opportunity for us?
I think the product space, the application space is still extremely attractive. There will be new products that come out of this technology that transform social media. Like, people love talking to these models. The usage time is insane.
Do you think this is good, Aidan? You grew up in a very wholesome, natural environment, and you mentioned your family also being in the UK. I'm sure you see them more now. You're in the UK. I do not want my kids growing up in a world where they're speaking to agentic systems more than they are humans, and like gaining fulfillment from speaking to a model.
You might actually be wrong. I think you might want your children to be speaking to an extremely empathetic, extraordinarily intelligent and knowledgeable, safe intelligence that can teach them things and have fun with them and doesn't get tired of them, doesn't snap at them, doesn't bully them, doesn't pick on them, imbue them with insecurities. There is no replacement to humans. There's no replacement. There's no world where suddenly we all start dating chatbots and human birth rates plummet. I don't think that happens, right? Like, I want to have a child. I can't do that with a chatbot. A human partner. Yet. A human partner is way more, infinitely more valuable to me than whatever, however compelling a chatbot is. A human is so much more valuable. It's the same reason why I don't think we'll be able to replace humans in the workplace. It'll be an augmentation. Humanity will become more productive and do more. It's not that there will be less humans doing the work. You can't replace humanity. Think about sales, right? If I'm getting sold to by a bot, I'm not buying. It's that simple. I don't want to talk to a machine. For certain simple purchases, maybe, but for the purchases that count, the ones that matter to me and my company, I would want a human accountable on the other side of that deal. When something goes wrong, I need someone, a human, who has authority to be able to intervene. I really think that the fears around displacement and replacement, both on the consumer side, where we're all going to get addicted to chatting to these chatbots, and on the workplace, the end of work, there's going to be mass unemployment. I can't see that happening.
I think there's always a recognition that there's always this mild displacement in new technology adoptions, which is kind of standard, where you do see some form of displacement, but not to the extent where we're 80% of us are. I'm sure you look at your grandparents and say you stick a computer in there with email and they're like, what will we do all day? It's crazy. And so I completely agree with you there. I do worry on the lower end of the spectrum, though, being Klarna losing 70, 80% of their customer service team.
There will be localized displacement for sure. But in the aggregate, it'll be growth, not displacement. So for sure, there are certain roles that are vulnerable to the technology. It's kind of hard to come up with them. Customer support is definitely one, but at the end of the day, there still needs to be humans there to do that. Just not as many as there are today. But customer support is a tough role. It's really psychologically ugly. You get people screaming at you. The reality of it, if you've ever listened in on call recordings of what it's like, that's a really emotionally taxing job.
Yeah, it's very much like content moderation on large social networks.
Yeah.
That is emotionally scarring in many respects.
Every day you wake up, you go to work, you get screamed at and have to apologize for hours.
And that's just 20 VC.
I think that side of things, maybe we let the models handle those conversations and the humans can come in and help with, the actual customer support conversations that humans would enjoy dealing with, right? Ones about they have a problem that needs solving and they're not angry about it. There's just an opportunity to make this person's life better.
What does AI not do today that you think it will do in 3 years that will be completely transformative?
AI in general, I think robotics is the place where there will be big breakthroughs. The cost needs to come down, but it's been coming down. And then we need models that are much more robust.
Why are you bullish on robotics being the area of big breakthroughs?
Just because a lot of the barriers have fallen away. Like before, like reasoners and planners inside of these robots, like the software behind them, they were brittle, and you had to program each task you wanted it to accomplish, and it was super hard coded to a specific environment. So you have to have a kitchen that is laid out exactly like this,
exactly the same dimensions,
Yeah.
nothing different.
Yeah. So it's very brittle. And on the research side, using foundation models, using language models, they've actually come up with much better planners that are more dynamic, that are able to reason more naturally around the world. And so I think I know this is already being worked on. There's like 30 humanoid robotic startups and that type of thing. But soon, someone's going to crack the nut of general purpose humanoid robotics that are cheap and robust. And so that'll be a big shift. I don't know if that comes in the next 5 years or 10 years, but it's going to be somewhere in that range.
Aidan, I could talk to you all day. I want to do a quick fire round. So I say a short statement, you give me your immediate thoughts. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, let's do
So
it.
what have you changed your mind on most in the last 12 months?
I think the importance of data. I underrated it dramatically. I thought it was just scale. A lot of proof points have happened internally at Cohere that have just totally transformed my understanding of what matters in building this technology.
So now is the quality of data.
Yeah, quality. Like a single bad example, right? Amongst like billions. It's so sensitive. It is a bit surreal how sensitive the models are to their data. Everyone underrates it.
How much money have you raised now?
In total, about $1 billion.
Fucking hell.
I know, yeah.
That's a lot of money. What was
Yeah.
the easiest round to raise?
Maybe the first one.
What was that the fastest as well?
Yeah, it was kind of like a conversation and, here's a few $1,000,000, give it a try. So I think that one was probably the easiest. When you're trying to raise $500 million, it's a little bit more involved.
Do you slightly pinch yourself when you see $500 million going in an account? Because I manage funds today, but we get capital calls. And so it's not like, here's 500 million. It's like you call it over several years. And
Yeah.
you just get... Woof.
And the interest on it is fantastic. But yeah, I do pinch myself.
Your
I mean,
interest
my
on that
brain...
is 25 million a year.
I don't know what the specific number is, but it's a lot. It's a big number. I definitely... My brain is broken. Like, Cohere has broken my brain when it comes to economics and money. $500 million does not feel like a lot. Like, relative to my competitors, it's not a lot, right?
Does that worry you?
No, I mean, it's part of our strategy. Like, if we wanted to go take that deal, we could go take that deal. But our strategy has been to pursue independence and doing this ourselves.
If you can have any board member in the world, who do you have and why them?
Mike Volpe and Jordan Jacobs, my existing board members.
Why is Mike such a good board member? Many people say this.
Yeah, Mike's incredible. It kind of feels like he's seen it all before. Like, I can come to him with virtually any problem, and he's encountered that 3 times before. And the first time it went like this, the second time it went like that, third time it went like that. I think for you guys, you should probably do. Like, he just has such good experience and advice.
Jeff Hinton, Jan LeCun. Which one's your boy?
Definitely more Jeff. I have a closer personal relationship with him than LeCun, for sure.
Do you think Jan is too optimistic?
No, I'm way more aligned with Jan and his beliefs about AI. So Jeff is like very, doomsday pilled and thinks that this technology is going to destroy the world. Jan is much more optimistic, and I'm aligned in that direction. I think that, unfortunately, Jan has kind of become a Elon reply guy. I think Jeff is, like, my co-founder, Nick, he's super close with Jeff. They play chess every Monday. Jeff is so smart, so intelligent, and so thoughtful. Such a deep thinker.
You have teams in London now. You live in London.
I do.
Everyone talks about the death of Europe. I had the wonderful Delian from Founders Fund on saying that Western Europe will be a third world state or kind of collection of countries soon. And negativity is quite real here, it feels. How do you feel now building incredible engineering research teams in London and Europe?
England stands out from the rest of Europe. There's a technology optimism that exists here and a willingness to invest and make the changes necessary to support developing an ecosystem. In Europe proper, and by the way, my mom is British, my dad is Spanish, and I have both citizenships, so I'm also very much European, spent my summers there, family is there. Unfortunately, the culture is just hostile towards tech. It's hostile. Like the solution to tech is regulation in the European mind. I think there's pressure to change though. And France is becoming much more ambitious and making a lot of noise on the European stage as well as the global stage about we need to be more progressive. It might take a decade though.
In-person or remote?
Cohere was born in the pandemic. And so we're totally remote. We're all over the place. Not totally remote. We have offices in Toronto, London, New York, SF. Those are definitely the centers of mass of the company.
And people come in every day?
Yeah. In person is just so much better. It's just, you can't even quantify the productivity lift from in-person work.
What question are you never asked that you should be asked? Final one.
Where do you want things to go? I get asked a lot, where will things go? And I get asked a lot about the downside risks of the technology. There's so much fear in people's minds when they think about AI, and so little discussion about the opportunities we have. And I don't think people talk about that.
Where do you want it to go?
I think that the world is super supply constrained. And pretty much every luxury we have today has come from technology that has developed to increase productivity, boost the supply of things, make them more abundant, make them cheaper. And so what I really care about with this technology is driving productivity for the world and making humans more effective, able to do more. And I think it's so unsexy. Productivity is just so underhyped. But it is.
But if you apply a 5% productivity gain to the NHS, which is obviously our healthcare system here, that is a seismic needle-moving shift to the state of the country, the state of the country's budgets, the healthcare in this country, millions of people's lives every day.
Yeah. And in Canada, real GDP hasn't really been increasing. Someone called it the lost decade. Is people aren't getting. Real GDP per capita hasn't been increasing. So people are not getting wealthier. Things are not becoming more abundant. You can't afford more for a decade. And so that sort of stagnation, you start to get a lot of social turmoil and things start to be, it's not a growing pie, it's a fixed pie that you have to fight for your slice of. And I think those dynamics really concern me. Our priority as a society right now should be on productivity and growth.
Aidan, listen, I've loved doing this. Thank you so much for putting up with my, at times, rather base questions on rags and flops, and at times prying questions on fundraisers, but you've been fantastic.
Thank you so much. This is so fun.